Good morning, Judy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm well. So I'm excited for our conversation today around transforming K-8 science performance. For everybody who's joining us, I just want to introduce ourselves. I'm Francis Vidgen. I'm one of the founders and a former teacher myself, founder of No Atom. I taught with No Atom for 7 years, and with me today is Judy Higgins. Uh, Judy focuses on professional development. She's a professional learning specialist here at No Atom and works with teaching teams and teaching communities around effective instruction for science, the next generation science standards, and in both adaptive and adoptive states. And Judy, you are a career educator as well. You taught with No Atom. Could you just tell us a little bit about approximately how long you taught with No Atom and um, the grade levels that you taught in your career?
I taught with No Adam for about 5 to 6 years, and I had moved to Massachusetts, was taking on a new position. I previously had taught fifth and sixth grade science. When I came to my new position, we were piloting No Adam, and it was so transformative. I had to learn an entirely new curriculum. It was very, very different. And what I saw in my classroom over the next probably 2 years, as I learned it, as the students learned it, was just incredible. I had more fun as a teacher than I think I've ever had. And I say that so sincerely because I know how hard teaching can be. But my students just went to a level of engagement that I had never seen, and risk taking as well that went on for both me and my students. So I really enjoyed learning this curriculum, growing with this curriculum, and I really love introducing teachers to a new curriculum, which is always difficult, but I just feel so passionate about what I saw happen in my classrooms.
Hmm. Well, thanks. And that's a passion I think we all share here at No Atom. And in thinking about today's conversation around student performance, you already brought up some really foundational things. This idea of fun as a teacher, student engagement, and risk taking. And I love that you're talking about risk taking on behalf of yourself as a teacher and students in the classroom, because I know as a teacher myself, oftentimes we're encouraged to get students taking risks.
Mhm.
But oftentimes the conversation doesn't go as far as to say, and as teachers, we need to take risks. And so that discomfort that we're helping students overcome is also a discomfort that we as teachers have to overcome. And and I just love that. I love that that is something that you're thinking about. Kind of coming back to the purpose of this conversation around transforming science performance, let's maybe start with that idea of risk taking. In your experience as a teacher, but also in a professional development context, risk taking. How vital is risk taking to student performance? Is it, can you, and I guess to be very direct, can you impact student performance in a meaningful way without taking risks as a teacher and as a student?
You can't. I mean, I think that releasing responsibility is that's the risk taking. And it's so unnerving. But until you do that, true learning and understanding isn't going to go on. And that's all there is to it. And again, both as me as a teacher and my students, both of us as learners, understanding that I have to take some risks and trust that they are going to learn. I have to trust that they are going to enter. They're going to enter where they need to enter the learning at that point. And it's so, I think a teacher, one of the things that happens so often is we have such a fear of losing control. And being tightly controlled means that this is what everybody's going to learn today, and this is how they're going to learn it. Okay, that's good. That feels good. But do I know if anybody's learned it? I may have control and everybody may be doing the tasks that I give them and maybe giving back to me kind of what I was looking for.
Mhm.
Or maybe I might say as a teacher, ooh, nobody's really giving it back to me. I better do it again and
Mhm.
again and again and again until lots of time has gone by. I still don't know whether or not they've learned. So this is really hard because I'm going to be all over the place because I just feel so passionate about the whole risk-taking thing. So as teachers, we have to start to think about different ways of engaging students
Mhm.
and different ways to assess. One, are they engaged in what I'm doing, what I'm presenting, what I'm expecting them to learn? And are they with me or are they entering at some point?
Mhm.
And I think that's such a part of it is really having to. I've been teaching for a long, long time, and there were always ways that we taught, and they were very, here's how you do it. You give, and they give back, period. This one gets it, this one doesn't get it. And really having to rethink,
Mhm.
how am I going to present? How am I going to let them discover? I think that's
Mhm.
kind of what, and giving them lots of different opportunities to discover at lots of different levels. And
Mhm.
as a teacher, feeling okay with that. Okay,
Mhm.
that's good. Some students may be, up here, other students, they're grappling with it, but they're entering.
Mhm.
They're entering what we're
Mhm.
doing here.
Mhm.
And and then again, that's unnerving. It's like,
Mhm.
ooh, do I
Mhm.
do I continue? Because not everybody gets it yet. What do I
Right.
do?
Right.
So it's kind of that kind of risk taking.
Right. And so this is important because we all want and have to deliver differentiated instruction.
Right.
But the key is that the colloquial concept of differentiated instruction is what you were describing in terms of I have a plan, I have a way of delivering it, I have a desired outcome, and I'm trying to connect those dots, I as the teacher. And it's woefully unsophisticated in a
Yeah.
sense. It's in a sense the opposite of differentiated instruction because you're trying to pick a middle ground somewhere to meet all students' needs and then going at it. But a more sophisticated, what I hear you describing is more sophisticated in creating an opportunity, an experience where students can enter where they're at. They can begin accessing the curriculum, the content, developing the skills, engaging in the context, engaging in the phenomena from where they're at now,
Yeah.
regardless of being up here, 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 or anywhere else. And then using that instructional environment and our pedagogical techniques to move them forward. So
Mhm.
everybody accessing, everybody making progress, yet they're making progress at their own level and they're accessing at their own level. And so there is a level of sophistication to that, and it's not leveled readers. It's not
Right,
teachers trying to teach three programs instead of one program.
right,
It's about it's about viewing the instructional environment differently. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about around release of responsibility. Because as the teacher, if I'm holding tight control and responsibility for all of the movements in this instructional environment, and when I say movements, that could be literal, but it could also be figurative in the sense of connections. Because I know as a teacher myself, in my instruction, but also in doing professional development with communities the way you do, and participating in professional development myself, that oftentimes the phrase comes up that, I am, these are the connections I'm making with students. That's a very common phrase to hear in amongst teachers, but it's not, the focus has to shift from me as teacher making connections, because that's in a sense a logical fallacy. And we need to shift the learning to students and the opportunity for making those connections
right,
to students.
right.
And that to me speaks to the difference in the authenticity, but the difference between knowledge and understanding. So, and I think the different unpacking this idea of the difference between knowledge and understanding is important, because I think the two are used interchangeably in the field. And I
Mm,
think that it's very common for people to use them interchangeably, but not really reflect on the difference. So I want to kind of come back uh, to what you brought up around release of responsibility and students owning learning, and as teachers giving up some control. And I guess I want to ask how does how does releasing responsibility, like what does that look like, and how does that play out in the classroom differently than what we might traditionally expect or see in a K-8 classroom?
okay, there's so many different things. I guess I want to give an example of something that we use, which is helping students to make connections around something. And one of the most profound things that I experienced as a teacher was I had my own idea of making a connection. And this is what students should understand. This is connected to that. And when I was able to trust the students were making connections and accepting what their connection was, and then asking, well, can you explain that? How did you connect this and that? Because in my mind, it's like, I don't understand how that connects. I don't make that connection at all. And giving the student that opportunity to connect it with a life experience for them. And that was for me such a remarkable shift that, but I had to trust. I had to trust in that moment that I need to respect this. And I'm not going to just, call on, okay, you've got it, you've got it. Yep, that makes sense. I understand that. But as a teacher to say, I don't understand this, so let me ask. And that was one of those things that as a teacher, oh, the joy, like it was so much fun to say to a student, whoa, I never thought of it this way.
Mhm.
And again, that's that risk because sometimes the connection, we really had to dig for that. But one of the things that we may or may not get to today, but we'll talk about a lot, is discourse and helping students be able to, well, let me think, to help a student articulate how
Mhm.
is that connected? And maybe, and then taking it a step further, did anybody else make a connection like that? Do other people have questions around this? And this is when you start to see ownership. Whoa, this is, we don't necessarily have to try to guess what Ms. Higgins wants from us. We
Mhm.
can actually talk about our own experiences and maybe the connection, it's a little bit loose, it's a little bit out there, and we can talk about that. Can anybody else add on? Can anybody else help? So it's that bravery, that scariness of releasing responsibility is now suddenly leading to we're actually having a discussion about something. I'm considering different perspectives, something
Mhm.
that I want my students to do. Suddenly, I'm modeling something like, I'm going to consider that.
Mhm.
And that's when like things start to shift so much in the classroom that again, it's not me up front. This is what you need to learn. These are the connections you need to make. And as a teacher, that got obviously easier and more fun that I
Mhm.
could stand back and let them, and sometimes, it was a misunderstanding, it wasn't a connection. Well,
Mhm.
that's learning too, that's great
Mhm.
learning. Oh, okay, I didn't really understand that.
Mhm.
Great learning also occurred with a connection that really wasn't. So I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place here because this is just something that is really exciting to me. Does that
Mhm.
answer
Yeah, I
your
think
question?
it does. I mean, I think what I hear you saying is this is important for student performance because you're a key shift that you're making away from that model, that traditional model of instruction where it's I have my teacher plan, I'm carrying out my plan, and I'm looking for specific outcomes to assess and give the A or the 4 or whatever. Yeah, the shift that you're describing is a shift to an authentic learning environment.
Right.
I hear you describing that you are treating students as intellectual apprentices and that you're modeling listening by authentically listening and authentically engaging in creating an environment where the expectations are sort of shared between students and between students and teachers, where we're not asking questions to get specific known outcomes and check a box, but instead we are engaging in a process of, as a team, our classroom is engaging in a process as a team of trying to understand and to
Yeah,
question and to connect, not only on a personal level, but on an interpersonal level. And that's a game changer for performance because it's communicating respect and trust, but it's also creating agency.
yeah,
And I know these are all these things are from a research perspective very well supported for student performance. I think about Ron Richards' research at Project Zero, Understanding by Design, um, Task Predicts Performance from Dr. Elmore, and and what I hear you talking about is a shift in focus from a task that is intended to get students to produce a particular definition for a word or a fact in connection with a picture, and instead a focus where the task is on engaging in thinking and connecting and deepening the connections and looking for connections. And again, bringing that back to how we as teachers can engage English learners. We can engage students with language-based learning disabilities. We can engage students on IEPs. We can have differentiated instruction in mainstream classrooms by creating an instructional culture, but really a culture of thinking where every child can engage. Every
Yeah,
child can bring their connections, bring their ideas, and they're at the level they're at. And that's
right,
okay.
right. Well, and if I could just, I
Yeah,
can't
of
help,
course.
I want to insert this too, because I think it's so important as a teacher. Look at all the assessment, the formative assessment that's going on in that, as a teacher many years ago, I often had to wait until the end and give the test and then see, yikes, whoa, so many students, they weren't really getting it. And that aspect, and that was something that took me a minute to get. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so great. In the moment, we're seeing where are we all? And can I move on, or do we need to dip back into this? And I think that was another thing that my learning as an educator, that was so exciting to me to see these opportunities, right then and there. We're doing an assessment. And there's something so powerful about that too. So it's sort of like there's so much on both sides that we're gaining from something that is a relatively simple situation, a really fun situation, uh, creating a safe space situation, and look at all the things that are going on from that.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and I think about this environment that we've been talking about, that this authentic learning environment, this teacher risk taking by releasing responsibility, by trusting students, creating agency where we could
Mhm.
otherwise take the agency away and say, no, read this page, do this question, produce this, get your check. Um, it's very empowering. And I think about a few things in relation to this. One is I think about the role in terms of engagement. You brought up engagement earlier. Opportunity, dignity, respect, reward, how those are four vital ingredients for students in terms of getting them to engage. Is there an opportunity for me to learn? Is there an opportunity for me to make a connection? Is there an opportunity for me to take a risk? And in doing so, if it's my idea, if I'm not the A student, if I'm not the student who speaks English perfectly, whatever, is it an authentic opportunity, or am I playing a canned role in the
Mm.
sense of, is what I contribute going to be valued, listened to? Are people going to try to understand it? Or are they just going to judge it? Are they going to say, no, that's not the right answer. Thanks for trying, and reinforce potentially a lack of self-esteem or a lack of a sense that I have something to contribute. And I think about that willingness to listen that we model as teachers, but also reflect and ask follow-up questions as a key element of respect that we model, but also that students model and use amongst themselves. Like who wants to participate in a conversation where they're going to be judged, where they're expected. It's not really a conversation. It's not really about their ideas. And then like what's the dignity in that experience if I'm not trusted,
Mhm.
if we're coming to that with the expectation that my kids can't do this, or they don't have connections to this idea. Let's give it
Yeah.
a try. Let's open that door, and to your point, let's see what they can do, and they'll surprise us. And then the reward, I think too, Um, what is the reward? The reward is that participation is validating. That respect, that opportunity is validating that I, as a student, have agency. I can use it, and I can contribute. I also
Yeah,
can learn. And
yes,
it doesn't matter where I am in some sort of social hierarchy in among my peers. We're on a level playing field here, and that is that's what I love about learning with Miss Higgins, or that's what I love about learning with Mr. Vigent, because I know perhaps in other areas instruction happens differently in ELA or math or whatever. I don't think it should personally, but it may. But when I come into the science classroom here, opportunity, dignity, respect, and reward is there for me. I have agency. I'm trusted to be
yeah,
responsible for my learning, to make connections. I'm also held accountable in that process. And so I think that, I think I think there's so much to that. And I think what you're sharing about formative assessment as really reinforcing that
hmm
culture and that environment, because with formative assessments, like with my students, when they're lab planning, I have rigorous expectations of them. The thinking and the learning is on them. I'm creating an opportunity for them to engage in that scientific process, but not without accountability. You have 10 minutes. Get with your partner, get your lab notebook, question, research, hypothesis, come check in with me. I want to hear your ideas. I want to know what facts you're connecting to this question that we developed. I want to understand what you think is the answer to that. And so in that interaction, my students are coming up to me, and some of them at the beginning of the year that don't understand the expectations of my class may come up and say, here's the facts we came up with. Say, well, how's that relevant to the question? And they just go,
yeah,
it was in the back of the reader. And so my immediate thing is that, well, I don't understand how it's relevant. I know it's in the back of the reader, but I'm looking for you to be able to make that connection for me. So either you need to go back as partners and figure out the connection, if there is one, or you need to make a decision to change the facts that you're identifying as relevant to answering this question so that you
hmm
can come back and present those and talk about those. You got 5 minutes to go and do that. And so what I'm describing here is just the idea that in that moment, I, as the teacher, am learning about my students. I'm modeling questioning, I'm modeling reflection, and I'm modeling expectations and language and all kinds of things. Again, treating students as intellectual apprentices, um, and as scientists and engineers in my class. On the flip side, the students have that responsibility. To your point, they're invested. It's their thinking, and so they're being held accountable for that. And so they're able to go back in that moment and learn better
yes,
by incorporating that expectation, incorporating, in a sense, feedback, and rising to that level. And then they get to go on. While other students may have, and again, differentiating, other students may have met that expectation with their partnership and they get to move on. So again, it's about being more sophisticated as a practitioner, as a teacher, letting students come where they are, engage in that formative assessment checkpoint in the case of No Adam, and then I'm learning and they're learning, and we're all improving our game in a sense, this learning game that we're all involved in together. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I also kind of wonder, well, I have like a lot of other wonderings, but I want to just give you a chance to comment there if there is anything that bubbles up for you.
it, I think that it's like I want to say so much about, it's hard not to talk about the tools that we provide to support all these things.
Sure.
And I I hope that we'll talk about that later, because I think that's such an important part. as a teacher, like we talk about making connections, we talk about checkpoints, and it's really important to know that we as teachers are supported around this journey. It's not just, well, trust the kids and, it'll all work.
Right.
And because that was so helpful to me to know that I had a lot to learn as a teacher. I needed support
Mhm.
and I needed to understand why, as a teacher, I could stop creating 75 different things to
Mhm.
differentiate everything in my classroom
Mhm.
and to recognize everybody can do it entering at their level. And I think that's the fabulous thing, is to know that there are they're relatively easy supports for the teacher and the student to be able to enter the learning. And I think also it's important to note, because this was so important in my classroom, a student, even at the fifth grade level, cannot be able to read yet
Mhm.
and still be doing everything that we talked about, be part of the discussion, be making connections, to be, doing the lab planning and checking in, all those things. And I think that was another place that we got so stuck,
Mhm.
was we had to devote all our time as teachers to get these kids to learn how to read. We had to stop everything until they could do that, because they simply couldn't move on.
Mhm.
And that was such a powerful way for me to understand and honor that ability to learn, even if they they were at this point missing that component for a variety of reasons. And
Mhm.
so I think that those, when we go into those expectations, with those expectations that our students can learn, can understand, can complete those tasks,
Mhm.
it changes everything.
Mhm.
That you're suddenly, I so often in trainings, when teachers will be frustrated and say, they're really struggling with the, the reading, and, so we end up spending 3 days on the reading. And it's so great to be able to say, no, 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 stop, 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 stop. Do not
Mhm.
do that. It's
Mhm.
okay. You can move on. Some
Mhm.
will get it, some will understand it, lots won't. But
Mhm.
we're not giving up. We're just going to keep moving forward. We have other ways that they'll continue to learn and understand.
Mhm.
And that's that exciting thing about that shift, is
Mhm.
we do start with the reading, but it's not ending with the reading for some students. We can all move on and do all of this.
Right. Well, and I think the thing that always sort of shocks would be a strong word, but the situation you just described, um, somebody spends 3 days on reading aloud, underlining, highlighting, literally reading to the kids or having them read on their own, telling them what to highlight, telling them what to underline, asking questions. Why did we choose this? Why did we do that? Um, and it takes 3 days. And yet the outcome of it is not desirable. The students don't get it. The students are bored. The students are kind of disengaged. It's no wonder. Just describing that is not engaging. I would not want to engage in that myself.
Right.
Um, I mean, imagine as an adult sitting in a professional development session, have someone read to you, have them tell you what to underline, have them tell you what to highlight, and then go through that process. We would not enjoy that. But then I think about things like the picture thinking routine, which is what we encourage people to do instead of what I just described, using a thinking routine to engage students in making connections with visual images on the page, projecting meaning onto those images, and then listening to the page read aloud, just that page, and reconciling what it's actually about, coming to consensus on what that page is actually about, reconciling it to what they thought it was about, and the thing, and connecting back to the things that they noticed to clarify their understanding and add to it, and participating in that as a group rather rigorously, quickly, um, sparks lots of ideas, creates lots of um, buy-in from students and investment, but also a natural desire to listen for understanding, to look more closely. And I think, again, that's all part of this authenticity and culture of thinking that we're talking about. Um, and it moves away from this knowledge transfer model in that very traditional model of instruction, which is what I heard you describe earlier and what I just sort of canned as reading and underlining and highlighting. That's a knowledge transfer model, which from a research perspective, and in my experience, forget research, my own classroom doesn't work well. It works well for a few students
Um,
who are, by whatever means, are able to absorb, receive a knowledge transfer in that model, but it's not the vast majority. So it's no wonder to me that using that model is not positive for student performance in a science classroom, but even potentially in other contexts as well. Um, when I, we kind of keep coming back to this in a sense, but the the learning context itself, like um, in assessments, one of the things I was thinking about was we're trying to shift the thinking to students here. And I feel
mhm.
like we're describing it. We're talking about these supports. Um, and we haven't brought any up, showed any slides or whatever, but for folks that use No Atom, they should be familiar with those supports. Folks that don't, maybe they can access them on our website or elsewhere. But when I think about the supports that we're focused on, that we develop and incorporate in the curriculum, the supports are really frameworks that can be shared between students and teachers. And so we create a shared language and a shared culture. And what those frameworks function as is a tool for learning. It's a tool to help develop a process of learning or a process of engaging. And that process is something that can be used over and over in different contexts. And so it's almost a rule set or a language set. And I think that that's actually one of the real big secrets to transforming student performance is not approaching science as this discrete list of facts to be known and performances to be able to be performed, but in fact, to be able to, as a student learner, develop a process of learning, a process for learning that I can generalize, that I can use to engage the world around me and develop and use that content with a skill set to solve problems and answer questions for myself. Because if we can use the supports, use the curriculum to develop skills within students, which they can generalize and that they can use to develop their own understanding of content in general, in context in general, then they can apply that in a test environment. And I mean, my students performed top in our state in New Hampshire. We were always in the top 5. I know your students performed in the top in your district. You had students that were 85% plus free and reduced lunch, um, in the 90s, English learners, former English learners. So we're not, we're not, our experiences don't come from a place where um, things are willy-nilly. Like
Right.
these are challenging instructional environments, but yet it was possible. It's possible to have high performance and high engagement. Do you do you what are your thoughts around shifting the thinking to students and the context for learning?
Well, I think what the important thing that's happening is that you are you are helping students understand that they can be learners regardless of, I can't read, so I can't participate in this. I'm an English learner, so I'm just going to sit back and be quiet. And, you're opening this up to, this is available to everyone. And there are a lot of ways to enter. And I think understanding the richness of this, that when we're focused on the students that are giving the quote unquote right answers, because again, I think about the richness of suddenly everybody's engaged and I'm hearing these connections and aha moments that are so incredible and so rich and are part of our classroom, that you're transforming students. And that's when you can really start to, this isn't your burden to drag everybody to the finish line.
Right.
You're suddenly, we're all going to get there. And you may get there in 20 minutes. You may get there in 2 days. It's
Hmm.
all good. It's all good. We're all learning. And I think there's so much power to that, is you as a teacher trusting and then creating an environment where everybody can enter
Hmm.
and be engaged and be curious,
Hmm.
allowing that, because I feel as a teacher, as a human being, that's what it's all about. Let's
Hmm.
just let's just be curious.
Hmm.
And if they're not getting something, there's no curiosity there. I'm done. I'm done. I can't
Right.
get it. And
Right.
when you develop that nugget, as you were talking about, the picture thinking routine, like, oh, I can't read this, but I have a lot to say about this picture. There's a
Hmm.
lot going on in this picture. And
Hmm.
then for them to have that aha moment, oh, wait, okay, this is what everybody's reading about. All right, so I am in the game here. I can join in the discussion. Those are, when we as educators are able to embrace those. Oh, this is an interesting and different way
Hmm.
that I can use these different tools. And I think we should spend a lot of time discussing and looking at those tools and how do they work, because as that was for me the magic of transforming my classroom. It's not just, you go in there and release responsibilities. Like, what? Yikes, no.
Right. 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 Right.
And, my having these supports that I could explore, and as an educator see, oh, whoa, what just happened in my classroom? This was really exciting.
Hmm.
And again, I didn't release responsibility all at once, but as I gained more trust in their ability and they gained more trust in themselves, we sort of moved along. And there's just so many entry levels for us as teachers to
Hmm.
come in and utilize these different ways to engage, help them be curious, allow them to be curious,
Hmm.
and and trust that they'll follow that
Hmm.
curiosity
Hmm.
into great understanding.
Hmm. And that makes me think of another kind of important point in all this, which is the word that comes to mind as we're talking is like shepherding, in a sense, where there
Yeah.
are going to be students at the head of the flock and at the back of the flock and going to the left and going to the right, and that's okay,
Mhm.
and getting comfortable with that. The skill
Mhm.
set is to keep that flock generally making progress, and on an individual level, students at the back moving towards the front, those at the front moving further forward, and so on, and being able to navigate the school year in a sense. If
Mhm.
but but all of that, so it's like, what are we on a journey through? And I think the key thing here is phenomena. So a lot of this word phenomena gets thrown around a lot right now because the next generation science standards and a lot of programs have used that word as a way to identify themselves as next generation aligned or designed. And what often happens with phenomena is that it's it's basically a new word for an old technique of demonstrating something to students, mix two things together, let's all take a look, playing a video, let's watch the video, and then what precipitates is some kind of activity card or something that students are given, they follow that. Do they get the known answer? Okay, it's no different in so many ways than any other instruction that's been happening in the last 30, 40 plus years. Um, in the context you and I are talking about for the next generation science standards, in the context of NOADM in particular, phenomena phenomena is the landscape of what students are figuring out, what they're connecting with. And in a sense, that's what that's the landscape that we're shepherding them through. They're they're in that world of phase changes with water cycle and climate and glaciation, and like all these sort of things are happening. They are phenomena. As a teacher, we're creating this environment in our classroom that's authentic,
Mhm.
reflective, creating opportunities for connection so that as they encounter that phenomena, they become aware of different aspects of it. They are intellectually challenged to make connections, to execute thinking moves. And so the task within that phenomena is thinking
Mhm.
focused, not producing the known answer to the activity card. And and the importance of that is that in and of itself, it's authentic. It's out there in the world around us, and it gives students an opportunity, as we kind of come back to the supports you were talking about, it gives students an opportunity to use the supports as a learning tool by applying them to the phenomena in the world around them, but also the investigative phenomena, the experiments, the prototypes that they're thinking may be the solution to the problem or answer to the question, and that are giving them real data that's the product of their ideas about how they would use materials, or
Mhm.
so on. And I think why that's so important is that we aren't transforming science performance on state standardized testing or for students long term in college and life just by saying, hey, here's some phenomena, watch a video.
Right.
It's by actually engaging them and figuring out the connections that they have to phenomena, developing an understanding of what those connections mean, but also what that phenomena means. And by structuring tasks and supports that focus on students thinking, unpacking, connecting authentically with that phenomena, both in the world around them, but what's happening right in front of them in that investigative phenomena. So, and I think that is what sort of encompasses the shift, because I don't think that that's something that a teacher can do for 30 or 40 students in a classroom. It's just not possible. Like you couldn't do it for one student because
Mhm.
it's learning is within the learner. You can't learn
Right.
for somebody. Um, so anyway, we've covered a lot of ground here today. I guess
Yes.
kind of circling back, it's what do you want folks to take away from this conversation today?
Oh, okay. Well, I think to trust that students have it in them to learn, understand, and engage. But it's going to look very different with each student. That's as, I feel like there was a lot, but I think, and I guess the other aspect of to be able to recognize that means we've got to release some responsibility. How about you? That's a hard question because we talked about a lot today.
I think that at least one of the key takeaways here is that transforming science performance is number one about the culture and environment you create in the classroom for students to engage, and the degree to which that is authentic, and that tasks are focused on students thinking, not on producing a
Mm.
particular known factual outcome. Facts are important. Facts are real. But facts are static. And what we want, what produces high levels of student performance is students' ability to develop an understanding from facts and from ambiguous context and from connections, both ones that they may have in their background, but also others that they may observe or make through observation of others' ideas and the world around them. So I think that to me, I think that is the key takeaway, and that, or a key takeaway. I think I would add to what you've provided, and I think that a resource like KnowAtom makes that practical for schools and districts and for classroom teachers, because yes, we provide the supports, we provide training to be able to do these sort of things effectively. There is always a learning curve, and there's always a feeling associated with learning, and it can be uncomfortable, but it's a worthwhile shift. And if performance and engagement matter, then that's a shift that we as administrators, as teachers, need to put time and effort into, and we need to be gritty ourselves about practicing these kind of practices and moving the ball forward. So anyhow, unless you have, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add to that, and happy to.
That was a lot.
So, well, let's wrap it up then, and just want to thank everybody who has joined us and taken time to listen in on this conversation. I hope that that you found some useful tidbits in this, and you're welcome to reach out to us through knowatom.com. You can reach Francis or Judy by going to contact us. If you're interested in learning more about the supports, you can take a look under the resources section of our website at knowatom.com. And if you're looking for science curriculum, you're welcome to reach out and download some sample units under the curriculum section of our website. Thank you again for your time. My colleague, Judy Higgins, and again, I'm Francis Fidgen. Take care.
Thank you much.